The hidden brain hack for doing what you avoid, Lotus Method. There is something strange about avoidance. We know exactly what we need to do. We understand the consequences of not doing it. We feel the pressure build day by day, minute by minute, yet we still don't act. Why? Why do we avoid the things that are clearly in our best interest? Why do we delay the conversation, the workout, the application, the creation, the change? Most people think it's laziness. Others say it's fear. But what if it's neither? What if avoidance isn't a flaw in your personality, but a misunderstanding of how your mind works? What if there's a hidden mechanism deep in the architecture of your consciousness that's keeping you stuck? And what if there's a way to hack it? Let's start with what we usually get wrong. Most of us try to overcome avoidance with brute force. We push, we force ourselves to just do it, we set timers, we yell at ourselves in the mirror. And sometimes it works for a day, maybe a week. But then the resistance returns. We fall back into the same cycle, knowing, delaying, regretting. What if the problem isn't that you lack discipline, but that you are fighting the wrong opponent? You're battling your mind as if it were a machine, when in reality it's a garden. A growing, reactive, living thing. And in this garden, avoidance isn't a weed, it's a signal. It's telling you that something deeper is out of alignment.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This is where the Lotus Method begins. Imagine the lotus, a flower that grows in the muddiest water, yet emerges in perfect, pristine beauty. In Buddhist philosophy, the lotus represents awakening that emerges from struggle not despite it, but through it. And what if we applied that metaphor to avoidance itself? What if the very thing you're avoiding holds the exact material you need to grow? That the mud, your resistance, your fear, your hesitation is not something to be eliminated, but something to be understood. The first principle of the Lotus Method is this: avoidance is not random. It's precise. It is the compass of your hidden self. When you avoid something, it is not because it is hard, it is because it threatens a part of your identity that you have not yet integrated. Maybe you avoid writing because success would challenge your belief that you're not good enough. Maybe you avoid confrontation because somewhere deep inside, you equate disagreement with abandonment. Maybe you avoid finishing projects because being seen, truly seen, terrifies you more than failure. So the real question isn't, how do I stop avoiding? It's what part of me is being protected by this avoidance? When you begin to explore that question, the whole terrain changes. You're no longer at war with yourself. You're listening, you're decoding, you're cultivating awareness of the mud. And here's what's fascinating: once you name the fear, the resistance softens. Once you understand the mechanism, the compulsion weakens. Avoidance thrives in confusion. It dissolves in clarity. But this isn't just philosophy, it's neuroscience. When you avoid something, your brain isn't trying to sabotage you, it is trying to keep you safe. It's predicting pain and seeking comfort. Your amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up not just when you're in danger, but when you predict emotional pain, rejection, embarrassment, change. So forcing yourself to move forward without addressing the underlying threat is like trying to drive a car with the emergency brake on. You can do it, but it grinds, it burns, and eventually something breaks. The Lotus Method offers a different approach. You don't yank the brake, you release it. Slowly, thoughtfully. You sit with the discomfort. You ask, what belief is holding this avoidance in place? What story am I telling myself about this task, this moment, this version of me? And then, just like the lotus, something surprising begins to emerge from the mud. Not just motivation, but meaning. A reason to move forward that doesn't come from shame or pressure or panic, but from a deeper alignment with who you want to become. This is the hidden brain hack. You don't overcome avoidance by overpowering your mind. You partner with it. You stop treating your resistance as an enemy and begin treating it as a teacher. Every moment of hesitation becomes a doorway. Every wave of discomfort becomes a message. And if you're willing to listen, to look closely, to get your hands in the mud, you'll find that the task you've been avoiding is not just something to be done. It's something that is trying to transform you. So, the next time you feel that familiar resistance, don't run. Don't distract. Don't numb. Instead, pause. Breathe. Ask, what is this moment asking me to face about myself? That question alone can change everything. The mirror in the mud. How avoidance reveals who you really are. Avoidance is not the enemy, it is the mirror. It reflects, often with painful precision, the parts of ourselves we'd rather not meet. That's why we run from it. That's why we scroll, binge, distract, overplan, procrastinate. Because to face what we avoid is to face the truth of who we are, not the polished version, not the curated image, but the raw, unresolved self beneath the surface. And yet, paradoxically, it is only through that confrontation that we ever begin to grow. The Lotus Method isn't just about doing the thing you're avoiding, it's about becoming the person who no longer needs to avoid. And that's a far deeper transformation. Think about the last time you avoided something important. Not just a chore or a task, but something that mattered, a conversation you needed to have, a decision you knew was overdue, a project that called to you in the quiet but terrified you in the daylight. What came up in your body? Was it tightness in your chest? A sudden urge to clean the room? A voice in your head whispering, "It's not the right time"? That's the mirror. That's the moment your unconscious is trying to protect you from something you haven't yet named. And if you can pause in that space just long enough to observe, you'll begin to see the exact contours of your fear. Avoidance is rarely about the task. It's about what the task represents. Writing that book. It's not just about writing. It's about the fear that you have nothing original to say. Making that phone call. It's not just about communication. It's about the fear of confrontation, of disapproval, of being misunderstood. Launching that business? It's not about logistics. It's about the risk of failure, of exposure, of being seen trying and still falling short. Avoidance is symbolic, it always points to something deeper. And when we treat it only at the surface level, we miss the opportunity to evolve. This is where the Lotus Method becomes powerful. It invites you to look at avoidance not as a wall, but as a window. A portal into the exact area of your identity that needs healing, upgrading, or reframing. You don't just ask, "Why am I avoiding this?" You ask, "What identity am I protecting by not doing this?" Because that's what avoidance is at its core, protection. It is the psyche's way of preserving a self-concept that it believes is under threat. If you've always seen yourself as quiet, you'll avoid the stage. If you've always identified as a failure, success will feel like betrayal. If you've built your identity around being the helper, you'll avoid situations that require you to ask for support. The task is not the threat, the transformation it demands is. So how do we move through it? Not by shaming ourselves, but by getting curious. When you feel resistance, try this, sit with it, ask it questions. What are you trying to protect me from? What would I have to believe about myself to do this task confidently? What would it mean about me if I failed, or worse, if I succeeded? These questions don't give instant answers, but they unlock something sacred, awareness. And awareness is the beginning of choice. You cannot choose a new path until you've seen the one you're currently walking. Here's the truth most people never tell you. Every avoided action contains a hidden version of you. A version that is more courageous, more expressed, more alive. But that version comes at a cost. It asks you to shed the old skin, and shedding hurts. It's messy, it's terrifying, but it's also necessary. The lotus cannot bloom if it refuses to rise through the mud, and neither can you. Avoidance is the invitation. It's the whisper at the edge of your comfort zone saying, there is more to you than you're currently living. Most people turn away, but if you can pause, reflect, and step forward, even trembling, you begin to rewrite the story of who you are. You start to become the person who does hard things, not because they're easy, but because they're true. And over time, that becomes your new identity, someone who listens to fear but is not ruled by it, someone who sees the mirror and doesn't look away. The emotional alchemy of action, how movement transforms meaning. If avoidance is the mirror, then action is the alchemy. It is through movement, small, intentional steps, that we begin to transmute fear into freedom, hesitation into momentum, and confusion into clarity. However, most people misunderstand action. They see it as the result of motivation, the final product of inspiration. But the deeper truth, often missed, is that action creates the very motivation we think we need. It generates the energy we believe we must have before we begin. And in this reversal lies one of the most powerful brain hacks available to us. By moving before you feel ready, you change the meaning of the task itself. Let me explain. When we avoid something, we create meaning around it. But the longer we avoid it, the more sacred or dangerous or overwhelming it becomes. A 10-minute email becomes a symbol of our inadequacy. A 5-minute phone call becomes a gateway to rejection. A blank page becomes proof we're not creative. Over time, the task is no longer just a task, it is a monument to our perceived weakness. That's why it feels heavier the longer we wait. But the moment you take even the smallest action, typing one sentence, dialing one number, opening one document, the illusion begins to collapse. Your brain, which had built a fear-based narrative around the task, is suddenly confronted with new data. This isn't as bad as I thought. And that shift, however small, begins the process of emotional alchemy. This is why the Lotus Method doesn't begin with giant leaps. It begins with micro-movements, tiny, deliberate actions that pierce the bubble of avoidance and restore agency. Not because these actions are impressive in themselves, but because they change your relationship to fear. When you move before you feel ready, you teach your nervous system a new truth. I can act without certainty. I can begin without knowing the outcome. I can move even when I'm afraid. And that realization is transformative. It's not about achieving the task, it's about reclaiming your power to choose. But here's the deeper layer. Action doesn't just change your brain, it changes you. When you act in defiance of fear, you are not just completing a task, you are reshaping your identity. Every time you do something you've been avoiding, you are telling yourself a new story. I am someone who shows up. I am someone who can be with discomfort. I am someone who moves through resistance instead of waiting for it to vanish. That story becomes a new reference point, and over time, it becomes a new self-concept. You no longer need to convince yourself you're capable, you've proven it through behavior. This is the emotional alchemy of action. It's not magic, it's mechanics. When you move, you change your chemistry. You shift the balance from fear to focus, from paralysis to participation. And what's most remarkable is that this shift doesn't require confidence, it creates it. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action, it is its byproduct. We keep waiting to feel ready, but readiness is a myth. What we're really waiting for is the absence of fear, and that will never come. Because fear doesn't disappear before the leap, it dissolves during it. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like setting a timer for 2 minutes and doing the thing badly, imperfectly, awkwardly. It looks like picking up the phone and saying, "This might be weird, but I need to talk." It looks like opening the notebook and writing the worst first sentence in human history just to prove you can. These moments aren't glamorous, but they are sacred. They are the turning points where you stop outsourcing your agency to emotion and begin reclaiming it through action. Let me ask you something personal. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting to feel ready? What projects would you start? What truths would you speak? What changes would you make if fear was no longer your compass, but your cue to move? The answers to those questions aren't just hypotheticals, they are the blueprint of your next evolution. And the way you access them is simple. You act, you move, you begin, even when your hands are shaking. And in doing so, you perform the ultimate act of self-respect. You stop believing the lie that fear tells you not yet, not you, not good enough, and instead, you write a new story with your actions, one step at a time. Becoming the lotus, living beyond avoidance and into alignment to become the lotus, is not to live without fear or resistance, but to live with them in full awareness and to bloom anyway. The mud doesn't go away. Life will always bring uncertainty, discomfort, and challenge. But something fundamental shifts when you stop seeing avoidance as a flaw and begin seeing it as a compass. You no longer need to escape it. You begin to use it. The very things you once ran from become the very things that guide your growth. That is the essence of what it means to live in alignment. You are no longer ruled by fear, but informed by it. You are no longer shackled by avoidance, but shaped by what it reveals. When we talk about alignment, we're not talking about perfection or productivity. We are talking about truth. Alignment means your actions reflect the deeper voice inside you, the one that knows what matters, even when it scares you. The one that whispers, "This is the real work." To live in alignment is to listen to that voice more than you listen to the noise of your conditioned mind. It's to choose integrity over comfort, clarity over avoidance, meaning over momentum for its own sake. And here's the paradox. The more you live in alignment, the less effort it takes to act. Because your actions are no longer a battle, They're a natural expression of who you are becoming. This is the final layer of the Lotus Method, the shift from action as effort to action as embodiment. You're not just doing hard things, you are becoming the kind of person for whom those things are no longer hard. You don't need tricks or hacks or motivational speeches. You simply act, because not acting would feel like betrayal, not to others, but to yourself. And when your life reaches that point, something astonishing happens. Your relationship to time, to energy, to fear, to yourself, it all changes. Life stops feeling like a series of obstacles and starts feeling like a continuous unfolding of your deeper self. But this level of living requires something most people avoid even more than fear: responsibility. Then to live in alignment means you can no longer blame procrastination, distractions, or circumstances for your inaction. You see clearly that every moment of avoidance is a moment of choice. Not moral failure, not laziness, just a choice. And that choice, once seen clearly, is yours to own. That's both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it means the excuse of "I can't" may no longer apply. Liberating because it means you can, if you're willing to move through the mud. So what does it mean to live as the lotus? It means cultivating a life where discomfort isn't avoided, it's integrated. But where fear isn't a stop sign, it's a signal. Where identity isn't fixed, it's fluid, evolving with every courageous step you take. It means your daily life becomes a practice, not just of getting things done, but of becoming someone who is deeply connected to their own inner voice, and who trusts it enough to act on it, even when it's hard. Let me leave you with one final question, one that only you can answer. If you knew that everything you are avoiding right now was actually the curriculum for your highest growth, and how would your life change today? Not in theory, but in action. What would you do now? Who would you become next? That's the real hidden brain hack. It's not about hacking your to-do list or your dopamine, it's about coming into contact with the truth of your own becoming. And learning to move, not because the fear is gone, but because the truth is stronger. That's how you bloom. That's how you rise. That's how you live as the lotus. Not clean, not certain, not without mess, but full of purpose, full of depth, and full of power. Now go do the thing you're avoiding. Not because you have to, but because you can.